Hello and welcome to Broken Entertainment. And a little bit ago I did a video where I talked about James Tynion jumping ship at DC, abandoning the Batman comic to go work on his own stuff on Substack. And I called it a potential canary in the coal mine for regular book publishing. And I've got some additional thoughts on kind of where things are going in terms of publishing and some other markets as well in entertainment. But first, let's get into this article on Bounding into Comics where they talk about Ed Brubaker and additional comics writers are saying that DC and Marvel are not paying their royalties for movies based on their work. So I'll read it and go over some thoughts I have on that, and then we'll go from there. So I've been offered a special character contract that was really, really terrible, but it was that or nothing, an anonymous Marvel creator said to The Guardian when discussing a deal which allows a select few creators to claim remuneration when their characters or stories are used. And then instead of honoring it, they send a thank you note and are like, here's some money, we don't owe you, and it's $5,000. Said the creator in reference to a contract and $5,000 payment they sent as acknowledgement, and you're like, the movie made $1 billion. Sources confirmed the amount to The Guardian, which comes with a no obligation offer to attend the film's premiere. It's either that, they add, what their sources call a tacit acknowledgement that compensation was due, the contract, or nothing. Normally, Marvel and DC assemble a laundry list of names for a thank you section toward the end credits. Captain America writer and Winter Soldier co-creator Ed Brubaker knows this kerfuffle of an imbroglio all too well and sounded off on Scandal in a statement. Though Brubaker is personally secure from a financial standpoint and career-wise, he states that he felt obligated to react to the sickening unfairness of the situation. For the most part, all Steve Epting and I got for creating Winter Soldier and his storyline is a thanks here, there, and over the years it's become harder and harder to live with. So I want to pause here. That's not true. You got paid for writing the comics. And you get paid royalties for the comics. I know how DC and Marvel work. You got paid. You're still probably getting paid as those older comics continue through circulation in one form or another. The thing is that a lot of these creators are acting like, well, I made the Winter Soldier, and you put him in a movie that made $1 billion, where's my money? But that's kind of the thing. Because yes, you made the Winter Soldier, but you don't own the Winter Soldier, and you're not even renting out the Winter Soldier. You made the Winter Soldier in somebody else's IP. That means they have absolute control over it. You're less the creator in that sense, and more a scriptwriter. Now, he did come up with a character, I'm not taking that away from him, but from the perspective of IP, it's not his. They don't really owe him anything other than what they're contractually obligated to pay him, and that goes for a lot of other creators too. Now, that's the problem, right, with not making your own IP, and that's why we're seeing people like James Tynion move to Substack, because they own and control everything. Well, let's go ahead. I have a great life as a writer, and much of it is because of Captain Winter Soldier bringing in so many readers from my other work. But I can't deny feeling a bit sick to my stomach sometimes where my inbox fills up with people wanting comments on the show. He and co-creator Steve Epting have a prominent supporter in Black Panther and J.J. Abrams Superman writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, oh good for them, who also has a well-known run on Captain America. Long before I was writing Captain America, I read Brubaker and Epting's Death of Captain America storyline and Return of the Winter Soldier, and it was some of the most thrilling storytelling I've ever read. I'd rather read it than watch the movies. I love the movies too, but it doesn't seem just for them to extract what Steve and Ed put into this and create a multi-billion-dollar franchise. He added, just because it's in contract doesn't make it right. If I have some kind of leverage over you, I can get you to sign a contract to screw you over. It's just legalist. Well, again, who owns the IP? That's the question. Marvel owns the IP. You're writing in Marvel's IP. When you create the Winter Soldier, you're doing it knowing they have total control over this character. They can do whatever they want with it. That's why you can create the Winter Soldier, but you can't take the Winter Soldier to another company because you don't own it. Which means they don't have to pay you unless they're contractually obligated to do so. Now, is that right? Well, that's kind of a different animal. But it is legal. It's more than legal. It's the way it works. Think about it from another perspective. Think about it from Marvel and DC's perspective. If you owned the universe in which these characters are written, and then somebody made a character, and then you made a movie, and that movie made $1 billion, and they said, "Where's my $500 million?" Sorry, we own the setting. It's in your contract that any characters you make go to us because it's our IP. Why do you get all that money? Now, should they be paid more than they are? Probably yes. Most of their payment comes from, of course, their page rate and any royalties depending on which company they work for. And outside of that, should they get a whole bunch of money because a movie gets made? A movie's not related. Yes, it is using the Winter Soldier in this example, but again, you don't own the Winter Soldier. If you owned it, yes, they would have to come to you and pay you to use it. But they own it. You made it in their IP. They have control over it. The movie, unless you're writing for or consulting on the movie, you have no involvement in. It's like saying, well, hey, I didn't do that, but can you pay me for it? Well, you didn't do it. So why would you get paid for it unless you own it? And this is why I say over and over again, creators need to own their own stuff. It's time to move away from this model. Because the company can justifiably go out and say, no, we're not going to pay you anything because you had nothing to do with this. This is a movie. You don't own it, we do. This whole situation's a little sticky because on the one side you want to say, yeah, pay the creators, you owe them, but on the other hand, you don't. Because they don't own the thing. Now, there's a historic example of the two creators of Superman. They created Superman and sold it eventually to the entity that would become DC Comics. And they got hosed. Superman has made $1 billion, and they saw almost none of it for a long time till they did a public relations campaign when they were both getting older and living in poverty, and they got a little stipend out of it. They got hosed because they created Superman. That's their IP. Now, they went and sold it, but they should have still been compensated by DC because they literally created the entire concept of Superman and then sold it to them. But again, this is what happens when you just sign away your rights as a creator. Unfortunately, it's not morally right what DC did, but they could do it because those two signed the IP away. And a lot of people say, well, I want to get published. I want to get my creation out there. And people come at them with contracts and they just, oh yeah. Well, you got to watch what you're signing. You got to watch what you're doing because if we take traditional publishing as an example, if you want to write, let's say you want to write a 3-part story. You want to write a trilogy. Now, when you sign that contract with the publisher, you're giving publication rights to them. You're selling that to them. You've handed over a portion of your IP. Now, they can't turn around and make their own stuff with it, but they now have the sole rights to that publication. And if you produce your first book, and because you're a new author, it doesn't do all that well, you're like, okay, now I'm going to make the second book, and that'll do better. And the publishing company says, you know what? That didn't really make the kind of money we thought it was going to make. We're not really interested in buying the second book. Oh, okay, well, I'll go publish the second book. I said, no, you won't. We own the publishing rights. The more of your IP you own, the more control you have. Well, let's go ahead and we'll get into the rest of this. The comic industry's work for hire arrangement means at a minimum the big publishers owe creators little more than a fee and royalties. That's just what I just said. They keep people on with the incentive of a steady gig and a share in profits, which is paying off for a lot of writers and artists with the popularity of the MCU and the DCEU. This hasn't always been the case, as Marvel's relationship with Jack Kirby deteriorated under Jim Shooter, and DC kept Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster out of the equation for years when it came to profiting from their big creation Superman. In more recent memory, DC phased out paying Gary Ordway for Power Girl due to the similarity to Supergirl that can't be helped given her origin, and enacted their prerogative to print Watchmen sequels without the consent of Alan Moore or Dave Gibbons. This is ironic behavior when Kirby's situation inspired them to pioneer the kind of special character contracts dissected by The Guardian starting in the 1980s. This article goes on and on, but it's all boiling down to what I said. Control of the IP. If you want that buku money, then you gotta control that. And Marvel and DC doesn't allow creator-controlled content for the most part. Substack does. Indiegogo does. Kickstarter does. And that's where I'm saying I think we're going to see entertainment in general move away from these companies that say, you work within our IP, we control it, or in the case of publishing, you give us the rights for publication, and sometimes that also includes, merchandise rights and other similar rights, movie rights, that kind of thing. You got to really watch what you're signing away. I think we're going to see a movement away from that. And I'm not saying it's going to happen right now. Although I would argue we're seeing it now in comics. It's started. And it's going to accelerate. As the comic industry, the mainstream comic industry burns, people are going to flee. And they're going to run to stuff like Substack. And the more people on Substack, Indiegogo, and Kickstarter who used to be mainstream artists start realizing, wow, I'm making a lot of money here by controlling my own IP, therefore my own destiny and creativity. As they start to realize that, more people are going to jump ship, and it's just going to accelerate and snowball. I think publishing's going that route. Self-publishing is very, very prevalent. It has a lot of issues still, especially with acceptance among readership, but that's moving. The needle on that is moving. And you're starting to see traditionally published authors, Chris Ferracchio as an example, experiment with self-publishing. And they kind of put something out there because you get that total control of every step of the process. It's a classic business move. Own everything that you can in your process. They used to, and this still happens, but to a lesser degree. The big monopolies back in the day, they used to own the factory, the company that made the machines that were used in the factory, the company that sold the raw materials to the factory that they used to make the stuff with the machines made at the other factory, the transportation network to get the produced goods from point A to point B, as well as a large chunk of the sales and distribution. And because they did that, they were able to sell to themselves. Okay? And in terms of publishing and creativity in general, the more you control, the more you're not paying somebody else, or the more you're not giving away your rights to say, okay, you can do this and you can do this, because you're saying, no, I control my destiny. Now, right now, traditional publishing has the big advantage in getting your stuff out there and getting it recognized, but that's not going to last forever because self-publishing is gradually going to improve over time. It already has been, and eventually it's going to be more and more accepted. Gradually, over years, you're going to see a move away from I want to get traditionally published and more people going, I want control of my IP. As self-publishing becomes increasingly lucrative, because you make way more money if you're profitable as an author. You make way more money self-publishing than you do traditionally, because you're not, when you self-publish, you're the writer, you hire the editors, you hire the book cover artist, you hire the audiobook people, you do the formatting. You either send it to a printer yourself, or you go through something like Amazon does print on demand. So you're controlling every step of the process. When you traditionally publish, they have all of that. And for a lot of people, that's very, very good, because you're like, I want to get published. I don't want to have to deal with all this hassle. So yes, the agent can take 15% off the top. The publishing company can take X% off the top. And yeah, all I have to do all the marketing, because publishers don't do marketing for you. But at least I won't have to find an editor and a cover artist, blah, 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 blah. But prices on that stuff are going to go down over time as new technologies become available, and more importantly, as people begin to have more and more success self-publishing, other people who are in the industry or want to get into the industry as authors are going to start saying, I can make a lot of money that way. And they're going to start becoming hybrid authors. And you're going to basically reverse the process that we have now. Now, a lot of people self-publish with the intent of getting the attention of a traditional publisher and saying, see, I have fans, I have a following, I have these books sold, these books published, you can read what I've written other than what I'm going to submit to you and see if it's to your liking. And then they try to get traditionally published and become hybrid that way. I think you're going to start to see, and I use Chris Ferracchio as an example. I'm sure there are others. In fact, I know there are others. You're already starting to see that reversal of I'm traditionally published, but boy, it would be nice to make more money and have more control. So I think comics is going to unravel itself significantly away from traditional mainstream stuff, to the point, just spitballing, 10, 15, 20 years from now, all mainstream publishers of comics might be the kind that allow creator-owned projects as the norm. But spitballing. Now, other creative stuff is farther out there. It's all starting with comics because the infrastructure is already there. Everything is already there. In terms of crowdfunding, in terms of provability of feasibility of the model. Okay? You have multiple books that have been crowdfunded, which is the comic version of self-publishing. You have multiple books that have made $1 million or more. And that's not $1 million for a publisher, that's $1 million for the person doing it. So they're keeping way more of that money. And you're seeing 35,000, 40,000, 50, 65, 70,000, 100,000, 100,000 plus dollar campaigns routinely now. And these books don't cost that much to make. Even if you traditionally published a novel, you're nowhere near any of those amounts. But that infrastructure is there and it's proven. And once it became proven, because initially everybody laughed at these people, once it became proven, now you've got people like James Tynion looking at Substack and going, and they kind of experiment with some stuff. And they're like, wow, I made a lot of money off of that. That's where I see things going down the road. Now, we have video creation as well, movies, stuff like that being made on YouTube. I think that's all pretty far out there from getting anywhere near anything what we're seeing in either of the publishing industries. Hollywood is too powerful still. You're going to make way more money if you get your movie adapted in Hollywood than if you are making it at home. But at the same time, Hollywood doesn't pay writers very much. And they're spending a lot of time buying IPs from people. So if you can create your own thing and go out there and make a movie and it makes money, you start to talk about a different equation. We'll see where that goes. That's probably way down the road for anything there to change significantly. But we've seen it in comics, and I think very gradually, over time, probably a prolonged period of time, we're going to start to see that with traditional publishing as well. That's how I feel this is going. Now, as for these creators, should they be paid more? Yes, they should. In a morally just industry, Marvel and DC would pay them more, not because they have to, but because they understand where that success came from initially, where those ideas came from. Because make no mistake, those movies, a lot of them were farmed from previously done stuff in one way or another. The whole Infinity Saga was a comic series. Okay. Now, let's not say it's identical, but as far as IP goes, you don't own the IP, you can't control how much money you get out of it. So just some thoughts on where these industries are going and how I feel like things are moving along. Still think comics are the canary in the coal mine, and I think that's going to prove out over time with traditional publishing. We'll see. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Ring the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.